So the next item in our agenda, and we heard quite a bit about this in the previous session, so we're going to talk a bit more in detail about how GFDRR is supporting the mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction in schools around the world. So I'm going to invite Karina Ferreira, who's a disaster risk management specialist working on this topic for a while, to take the floor and tell us a bit more. Karina.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I am also, before I joined the bank, I was studying earthquake engineering. And if you see the VR experience that is in the lobby next to the cafeteria, where you can experience an earthquake in a school, you will hear the story of Rosita. And Rosita is a student that she's in her primary school. She feels an earthquake, and the earthquake causes lots of damage to the school. And Rosita then decided that she wants to be an engineer, and she wants to contribute to build the schools that are safer. And this is a real story. This happens in Peru, and in that experience, the schools are real schools that are reproduced, and the government was able to develop a solution to make those schools safer. You will see also a video in Turkey where a student says that I want to grow up and be an engineer, also to build safer schools, because my school is safer, and I know the importance of this school to be safer. And you know, that makes me remember of my own experience and why I became an engineer, and why I joined this team of safer schools, because we believe that we can make schools safer. And you will see today that the concept of safety is very broad. It includes many critical development objectives, and I think this experience is shared by many of my colleagues. So I have today with me Sally, but we are a very large team. Many of you are actually in this room. Others are right now working on the ground. They are preparing with the government of the Philippines a reconstruction project of schools after the devastating tropical cyclones and earthquakes that happened recently. They are they are working in Pakistan in reconstruction efforts in the education sector. They are working right now all over the world. And today in this session, we will hear about what we have been doing over the past 10 years to reach this goal of making schools safer. And we will hear about specifically the work in Turkey and in Mozambique. So I will give the floor to my colleague Salih to introduce himself.
Thank you so much, Karina. This is Salih Buğra Erdurmuş. I'm joining from Ankara, Turkey office. I'm working as a senior disaster risk management specialist based in Turkey. Actually, I started to think about, I think being an engineer is a prerequisite to sit at the side of the desk, I guess, but I'm a civil engineer by profession. And I have been working for disaster risk recovery and mitigation projects since my early days of professional life. I started working at the government site just after the devastating 1999 earthquakes. And from the very first-hand experience, I was able to witness how people feel about the recovery actions, and they want to feel the government support on their side together with the international community. Now I'm at the other side of the desk with the World Bank and continue to support the people, especially the vulnerable people. Happy to be here. We will have a video from the Turkey schools at the earthquake region, how the schools performed just after the earthquake. and how they became shelters for people and how they created confidence among the post-disaster lives of the impacted citizens. Yeah, that's all from my side. We can just start. Thank you.
So we will go to the presentation. So we will talk about the work that GFDRR has been doing over the past 10 years. So this has been a pathway to make safer schools. And as I mentioned before, safety here includes many development objectives, including more broadly resilience, but also climate resilience, sustainable and inclusive school infrastructure. But what is the size of the problem? So we, in collaboration with the risk analytics group in GFDRR, we developed what we call the global baseline of school infrastructure, which provides global risk indicators about the problem of school safety. These numbers that you see here is just for earthquakes. And so this is an underestimate of actually the size of the problem if we take into account all hazards. We know that on average, every year, 2,500 children can die in schools just because of collapse of school buildings. 35,000 classrooms are lost. 800,000 children learn in temporary classrooms without appropriate conditions because of disasters, and this represents about $3 billion in damages every year. We could also estimate that at least 1 million existing school buildings are highly vulnerable. So it means that they need some type of intervention, rehabilitation or reconstruction. This gives a dimension of the problem worldwide, and this is a global problem. So all countries are facing, because of one hazard or other, this same challenge. If we look at the situation within the World Bank, we could conclude through portfolio review that we have done a couple of years ago, that in the active portfolio of school infrastructure investments, at least 4 billion of those investments is at risk of tropical cyclones, and at least 3.3 billion is at risk of earthquakes. These are projects that are implemented by all global practices across the bank. About 70% of these investments are managed by our education colleagues. So this means that if these investment projects do not take into consideration objectives related to safety, resilience, inclusivity, sustainability, we are facing high risks in terms of the sustainability of those investments, and we can actually be investing in unsafe schools. On the other hand, this represents a very significant opportunity to address the problem of school safety, if those considerations are adequately integrated into the design of those operations and implementation of those projects. So this means that the operational relevance of the work that GFDRR is doing within the bank is extremely high, because the expertise to address these topics is within this team, this Safer School team. This is, as I mentioned, a large team of engineers, architects, disaster risk management, urban planners, etc. And we have been providing support to those task teams that are preparing bank-wide those school infrastructure investments. And there is a very high demand. And this is something that we have been developing solutions to be able to respond to that very high demand for that technical support within the bank. But in order for the bank to have a concerted action bank-wide to be able to utilize all those investments to effectively contribute toward safer schools, we need to have a common framework. So we need to, all of us, irrespective of in which GP or team we are, we need all of us to use the same standards and the same objectives. So the preparation of that framework is something that we are currently working on with our colleagues in the education GP and other global practices. And this framework is being built upon two critical lessons. One is that it's a fact that resilience is a global priority for delivering education, because our education colleagues say that school infrastructure is the third teacher after the teachers and after educational materials and curriculum. It means that if school infrastructure is not able to provide the level of service that is necessary, and when I mean by service, I mean safety, but not only safety, it means that that will affect the capacity of the system to deliver quality education and to address the learning crisis that our countries, our client countries are facing now. The second lesson is related with the point that I just mentioned, is that safety is critical, is important, but is not sufficient. And there are four key objectives that we need to consider to create what we can call a quality learning environment. First is that we have to ensure these learning environments are inclusive for all children. The second is related with building resilience of those learning environments. The third, fostering learning-oriented environments so that those environments are also conducive to learning. And the last one is promoting green learning environments. So is how to also include climate change adaptation and mitigation within these projects. And our objective is then to create those improvements in terms of enhanced learning, provide better health and well-being to children, and foster positive relationships within those learning environments. But this is the framework, and we are working now in actual creating operational tools that will allow to translate this principle into the actual technical design of those school infrastructure projects and implementation. Let me just briefly now mention what has been achieved up to now and what is our three main lines of action. So this group in GFDRR has been supporting 35 countries over the past 10 years. These projects have benefited more than 121 million students in about 564,000 schools. And we have been capable of supporting task teams in the design of investment projects in the total of about 3.1 billion. But as you have seen, there is demand to actually increase that table of support, because the active portfolio is actually higher than that. And this is where we want to go in the next years. This type of support has taken the form of policy reforms, building technical capacity, planning capacity, institutional capacity within the countries, but also actual investment projects. So the idea is that we have been working with our client countries to create the enabling environment for them to be able to scale up this type of interventions. So the first line of action, and I recall what was mentioned in the previous session, the importance of knowledge. In the Safer School program, the knowledge has been essential to be able to provide that support to our countries. And we have developed two key tools: the Roadmap for Safer and Resilient Schools and the Global Library of School Infrastructure. We know that making schools safer is a long-term process. And the roadmap provides guidance to school infrastructure managers, to other bank task teams, to partners, step by step, the process of diagnosis, analysis, and planning. And the result of this process is a school infrastructure plan with very concrete objectives in the short, medium, and long term, an investment strategy and the implementation strategy. And the implementation of these projects have been supported at the technical level by the Global Library of School Infrastructure. This is the largest repository of information about school infrastructure vulnerability, this global library. It's really a library. It's a place that is public information. It's tools that are available to everyone about how to assess school infrastructure vulnerability, but also how to address the problem and how to design those solutions. So you will find more information about this in some of the publications that are available on the table, and there is also a website on the World Bank webpage where you can see information about the tools and also information about the projects that we have been implementing in the 35 countries over the past 10 years. This map gives an overview. You can see that most of these projects have been actually supporting investment operations, but they apart from, in addition to incorporating those objectives of safety into the design of those operations, these projects have been designed also to create a kind of a platform that can be replicated by the government in other investment projects. So they are creating standards, new standards. They are supporting policy reforms, and they have been building technical capacity, contributing with new designs for schools. And that has been very important also to mobilize more financing. So they are creating that example that countries have been replicating to be able to address the problem of their school infrastructure at large scale. And the last line of action is that increase that capacity within the bank, so the capacity of task teams and the capacity of governments, our counterparts. And to this end, we have developed three important tools. One is the framework on green, resilient, inclusive, and learning-oriented environments that I mentioned before, that creates that framework that can be consistently used across the bank to ensure that all of our operations are actually contributing to address the problem of school safety. The second is an e-learning course on the roadmap, which will be launched in July. And the third one is a school infrastructure project cycle toolkit. I was mentioning of the need now to have actual operational tools that allow task teams and our clients and partners to translate the principles of the framework into the actual design and implementation of operations. And this is what this toolkit is providing. So I will end here my presentation. If you wanted to hear more about the work that we have been doing, so we will be providing you, the contacts, and I think now we are ready to go to the example of Turkey with Sally. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we're gonna go with the video. Actually, the video footage is from the schools at earthquake region. And the footage was taken after the earthquake. And it mainly is about the performance of the schools that the World Bank financed after the earthquake. So, and the role of those schools, how they help the people to restore their lives at the early days of the post-earthquake environment. Let's watch the video.
2023 in Turkey caused the deaths of over 50,000 people. In southern Turkey, over 2 million people had to be housed in temporary accommodation, and there was an early estimate of more than $34 billion of direct physical damage, with overall losses and needs of more than $100 billion. As the recovery and rebuilding process continues, a remarkable story is emerging of how recently constructed seismic resilient schools withstood the worst of the shocks, and they have become temporary shelters, providing earthquake survivors a safe space and operations centers for coordination and distribution of aid.
Mevcut okullarımızda ciddi bir hasar durumu yok. Depremden etkilenmemiş bile diyebilirim. Gittiğim baktığım kadar. Elbette bu bir mutluluk vesilesi değil bizim için. Bu kadar büyük bir afetten, bu kadar büyük acılardan sonra ancak teselli olur.
Büyük bir korkuyla yaşadık. Yine buna şükür. Çocuklarımız sağ salim, canlarımız sağ salim. En zor günlerimizde bu okul bize kapılarını açtı. Sağ olsun, Allah razı olsun. 5 aylık bebeğimle, 4 bebeğimle yollara düşmedim, dışarıda kalmadım, soğukta kalmadım.
These southern Turkey regions, home to over 14 million people, already had some of the highest poverty rates in the country and host more than 1.7 million Syrians under temporary protection. Since 2015, the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery has provided support to Turkey on the development of its resilience agenda.
Specifically, government of Turkey's Safer School agenda is supported by the construction of up-to-date standard safe schools, reducing the risk in the long term, and also it helps creating a quality learning environment for the Syrians under temporary protection and hosting communities.
Since 2017, Turkey's Ministry of National Education, with the funding from the European Union and support from the World Bank, have built 57 disaster-resilient schools, over 1,300 classrooms.
Deprem sırasında evdeydim. Çok korktum. Deprem olduktan sonra okulumuza geldik, okulumuzda kaldık. Sonra ailem, annem, babam, ben, kardeşim. Kendimi çok güvende hissettim. Çünkü buranın sağlam olduğunu biliyordum gerçekten.
There were 24 of these safer schools in the earthquake zone, and they proved their resilience. By late March, 14 were already back open, with more to follow, while 4 were being used for emergency temporary sheltering and disaster management.
Birçok velimiz okulu daha öncesinde gelip şöyle kısaca bir gezdi, gördü. Okulumuzun herhangi bir yerinde herhangi bir en ufak bir çatlağın, sıva çatlağının bile olmadığını gördü. Biz eğitim öğretim faaliyetlerimize depremden önce olduğu gibi sorunsuz bir şekilde kaldığımız yerden devam ediyoruz.
The project shows how infrastructure investments in disaster risk reduction can help save lives, bring hope, and provide safe spaces during the most difficult times.
Suriye'de oldum. Savaş çıkınca Türkiye'ye geldik. Ben de benim aletinde. Okulu seviyorum. Herkese seviyorum. Müdürleri seviyorum. Hocaları seviyorum. Büyük olunca mühendis olacağım. Sonra okul yapmaya yapacağım. Sonra evler yapmaya yapacağım. Evler olarak indiler diye kırıldılar evler depremden. Onlar için şöyle yapacağım çocuklara, adamlara.
Thank you so much for watching. Each and every time I watch this video, it becomes emotional, you know. This is the most satisfaction that you can receive when you conduct the work and you see that it's really useful for the lives of the people. I think we can shift to my short presentation. I'm just going to the other side. Actually, the video shows one dimension of the work that we are doing with the GFDRR support. And it also requires the recognition of multiple international institutions, including the European Union and the donor countries as well. So safer schools, in fact, is not something very new in Turkey, but it has a past. And it was built on many efforts throughout the years. Elif Ayhan is here. She was one of the frontiers of those studies when it first started in Turkey. I cannot see Joaquin, but he was also an important part of those efforts. Lana, Zoe, actually, you are all part of this good job. I was at the other parts of the bank at those times, but now I'm collecting the fruits, okay? Now it's my turn. Actually, Umberto and Kutluhan Bey talked a bit on the impacts of the earthquake in February 2023. What I can say shortly is that one single earthquake tripled the losses that were happening since 1990. And it's much more devastating than the 1999 earthquakes. What's its relation with the schools? For the educational facilities, the needs on the schools' recovery and reconstruction is around $2 billion US. Even in the case that the public infrastructure performed better compared to the private buildings. Also, it's important to note that in Turkey, exposure to climate-related hazards is worsening, including the earthquake-affected area. And also, this disaster disproportionately affected women and other vulnerable groups. Actually, the Safer Schools journey started with the Istanbul Seismic Risk Mitigation and Emergency Preparedness Project, although it was not under a streamlined program. That project, which I also was a part of, succeeded in retrofitting and reconstruction of more than 1,300 school buildings that reached more than 1.5 million students, with indirect beneficiaries around 5 million. So it constitutes almost 1/4 of the overall city population. And the financing amount reached up to almost $3 billion US. But it didn't stop there. It continued with the Ministry of National Education. And although the initiatives from the Ministry of Education started in 2066 with the World Bank financed projects, it became possible for the government to endorse Safe Schools initiative with the 2015 Sendai Conference, and it became a program. What did GFDRR support on the way forward? Actually, it was about the development and implementation of the National Safer Schools program. And it contributed to the needs assessment for school buildings. And it helped also to scale up, developing a scale-up strategy. So at the end, what are the results? The first results are the two operations that we have in Turkey. The first one is the Education Infrastructure for Resilience project that you have seen the video for. For this project, we have almost finalized the implementation, and the resilience of the schools were proved after the earthquake. The second operation is on the disaster risk management in schools. It's also supporting the recovery actions at the earthquake region. But it's, I think, important to say that we are only a drop in the sea. The government effort in Turkey is much more higher than this. Just for the simplification of the presentation, I'm not providing many numbers, but our value added is mostly on the development of the program and how to design the program. Actually, there are also budgetary constraints. It's something else that we can discuss. But at the end, with these two operations, what we are trying to achieve is resilient schools for all, including the vulnerable people. And it aims to reach more than 100,000 direct beneficiaries for the schools to be reconstructed and more than 2,000 beneficiaries at the earthquake region. So important how you reach these results. Actually, you need to satisfy the quality learning environment requirements. These include seismic safety, land use planning, energy efficiency, fire safety, and also safety at workplace, universal access, gender-friendly spaces, safe bathroom and sanitary facilities. So these are the things that you need to consider very carefully at the design stage without no compromise during the implementation until the completion of the schools and even during the maintenance and operation. Actually, these are the dimensions that I was talking about. These are all, engineering, pure engineering, numbers, how to construct, how to implement, how to finish the physical infrastructure. But whatever you do, it's important how it is perceived from the community. So for that, there is a need for a communication plan and strategy. Even if you want to construct a brand new, fantastic school, as long as the community is not satisfied around, so it's not a success. So how can you achieve this? First, there needs to be some kind of an awareness for the community, and people should feel free to complain as long as they need to do so. There is always a social sensitivity you cannot avoid, but it can be managed to some extent. Also, you need to use the media tools very efficiently. Also, when you have people believe in your plans, then people start supporting you. The picture is from a couple. These old guys have donated their only land to construct a school building as they really believed in this agenda of the government to construct resilient schools. And the school also started to serve for the Syrians under temporary protection. So there was no discrimination. It's important to make you people believe the business that you are conducting. Thank you.
Thank you. And from Turkey, we are going now to Mozambique. We will hear from the Minister of Education and Human Development about the comprehensive Safer School program they have been implementing in Mozambique. Thank you.
A experiência de Moçambique com desastres naturais recorrentes nas últimas décadas mostrou que há uma necessidade urgente de soluções a longo prazo que deem mais resiliência aos riscos naturais e recuperação após desastres naturais. Foi assim que foi introduzida a iniciativa Escolas Seguras, liderada pelo governo de Moçambique, financiado pelo Banco Mundial, através do projeto Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery. Tinha como objetivo geral produzir diretrizes sobre a segurança escolar e promover a construção de escolas mais resilientes. Também identificarmos aquelas áreas mais críticas, de modo a podermos melhorar e analisarmos alternativas para alcançarmos escolas mais seguras e também gerar consenso sobre diretrizes e medidas técnicas e a normalização do processo a médio e longo prazo para a construção de escolas mais resilientes a desastres naturais. Assim sendo, nós gostaríamos aqui de relatar os fatores de sucesso, que foram, em primeiro lugar, zoneamento e mapeamento dos riscos por tipo de desastres e por distrito em todo o nosso país. A criação do grupo técnico consultivo também foi um sucesso, garantindo assim uma abordagem mais holística e acordos foram também estabelecidos, soluções técnicas foram adotadas, mapeamos os locais de risco e também a cooperação institucional foi criada e garantida. Também foi estabelecida com este projeto, foram estabelecidos códigos, normas de construção adequadas a cada um dos riscos, porque nosso país é longo e tem características diferentes em cada região. Temos aquelas zonas que são mais afetadas pelos desastres naturais e outras não. Por isso, o projeto adotou as construções, as características locais. Entre 2017 e 2021, com apoio do Banco Mundial, 1.100 salas de aulas foram reconstruídas, foram reabilitadas ou mesmo construídas, adotando essa metodologia de escolas mais seguras, de acordo com os novos padrões de construção mais resiliente, e beneficiou mais de 132 mil crianças. Este projeto que nós realizamos com o apoio do Banco Mundial, através do Fundo Global para a Redução do Risco de Desastres, foi fundamental, de modo a criarmos aqui a resiliência, darmos aqui o nosso testemunho de que o apoio do Banco Mundial veio reforçar as nossas infraestruturas escolares e, assim sendo, poderemos no futuro criar melhores condições para os nossos meninos terem melhores condições de poderem estudar. Queremos aqui não só manifestar, mas, acima de tudo, agradecer o apoio que temos tido para a criação de melhores condições para os nossos meninos. Muito obrigada.
So these examples illustrate that together with all of you, with our partners, with the government, and with the communities, and the communities are not just beneficiaries, they have been active partners over the past 10 years. There has been significant progress made, but there is also a long way to go until we can actually say that the schools are safe. So we look forward to continuing working together towards that goal. Thank you very much. I think we will now open the floor to a couple of questions or comments. Anything that you would like to share? Please.
Just a short comment on the resilience of schools. As I said, that since we are now in the process of evolution ourselves, the bank itself and the related all stakeholders, we need to standardize the definitions of resilient structures. I think that's a good time that we can do that, because the room that we are living in, we understand that for a given there's a roof on the top. So that defines the conference hall. So like that, if we embed this definition of resilience into the definition of a school or any infrastructure which is related to it, the examples like we learned from Turkey. So the embedded resilience will define the infrastructure of school per se, and thus there's allocation definition, then thereafter support should be related to compliance to those standards worldwide. only then we can force the governments, public sector, private alike to go on the way and delivering those standard safety protocols which are critical and which are embedded. Second, I would say that we could also plan on multi-use of those buildings. Like we saw that there were schools which were used as the shelters. Why not some of the resilient existing infrastructure can be used for our schools till the time the schools are not safe or resilient enough to take on their independent task of the resilience. And thirdly, if that if that is not an option, or that's maybe a costly option, maybe distant learning, e-schools, versions of the schools can also take on some of the schoolings till the time the school is itself not resilient, or there is not better way of alternating the multi-use of this existing infrastructure as a school come other public utility department. Thank you.
Actually, thank you so much for these three important aspects. For the resilience of schools, you are definitely right that there needs to be a satisfactory definition what resilient school is. I think it has multiple dimensions. It's not only about seismic safety, because resilience is not only against seismicity. I think one lesson learned from the Turkey experience is the resilience against multi-hazards. So, for example, the Vice President from the Strategy Budget Office, Kutluhan Bey, was talking about the liquefaction, soil liquefaction. It's an engineering term. It means the soil moves and your building get drawn into the soil. So the building may be perfect, but it will no longer function, even if it stands after the earthquake. So there are multiple dimensions. It's the floods, it's the landslides. Yes, the codes are important, but also the planning, zoning is very important. And the building itself should adhere to also up-to-date standards. The, energy efficiency, the climate resilience, and also it needs to be gender-friendly and also provide universal access. I think these are not only, I think not only schools are bound with these standards. These standards should be universal throughout the country, and schools should also follow those. For the multi-use of school buildings, I guess starting at the design stage, this is something that can be done as long as the building has the necessary space and it can function for the multi-use after the disasters, but it should be in the plan from day one. This is doable, and school buildings are really to the point investments that can achieve this target. For use of other public buildings, schools, frankly, I don't know much about it, so I cannot comment a lot on that. But for sure, we can utilize the knowledge exchange with you and the institutions in Turkey. How to share the experiences in between two countries would be willing to pioneer that effort.
Thank you. Any other question or a comment? Okay, so I think this is the end of our session. Thank you for participating, and we look forward to continue this discussion. Thank you.